Okay, so this is Chandra Easton here from Star Astrology Healing, and I'm talking about the summer solstice from the Australian perspective, which occurs, I think it's 4 minutes past 2 on Monday, the 22nd of December. And the reason I'm looking at this is because as astrologers, most of us know that we have two solstices, a summer solstice and a winter solstice, and then we have two equinoxes. And the astrologers tend to then use those four charts to divide the year, the 12 months of any year, into four quadrants. And so we have one quadrant beginning when the sun enters Capricorn on the 22nd of December, and that quadrant, that 3-month period, doesn't finish until the equinox on the 21st of March. So the period that I'm talking about here is 22nd of December through till the 21st of March next year. I'll talk a little bit about the sun entering Capricorn from an esoteric perspective, and then I'm going to look at the chart in terms of the purpose of the chart, the health, the wealth, the international affairs, the Dharma, and a little bit more on the citadel of love. Okay, so the sun entering Capricorn. Capricorn, from esoteric astrology's perspective, is one of the signs on the it's associated with initiation, it's associated with the spiritual path. So for some individuals, it's the entry onto the path proper, the path of discipleship, and a portal, therefore, to higher consciousness. For other individuals, very rarely, it's entry onto the path of initiation and what we call the older disciples. We refer to this period of not so much the sun entering Capricorn, but more around the Christmas New Year period as the birth of the Christ in the cave of the heart. And the Lord Dwell Cools told us in esoteric astrology that initiations in the 21st century happen en masse for groups, not for individuals, and they happen around the major festivals. And so the first initiation sometimes will happen for groups around the Christmas festival. So here we have the chart. Let me find my little button. The summer solstice chart, 4 minutes past 2 on Monday the 22nd. And you'll see the sun here at 0 degrees, 0 minutes Capricorn. That's the actual solstice point. But I'm going to look at this particular one from the purpose. So there's a few things to notice. So immediately I notice that the moon is sitting in the 17th degree of Capricorn and has this square that's running up to the Libra ascendant, up to Chiron. It's directly opposite Jupiter. So we have a cardinal grand cross. Yeah. Now, and the interesting thing about the middle degrees of Capricorn is that that's where the fixed star Vega is. And now Vega from the Lady Amanda's Walk the 17 Steps is a portal or a way of developing cosmic consciousness, responsibility, and brother-sisterliness. And the moon is, I guess you might say, it's the lowest common denominator of humanity. So here's the lowest common denominator of the Australian humanity. This is cast for Canberra, being asked to lift its game, to think big, cosmic consciousness, to take some degree of responsibility, and to operate in the name of brother-sisterliness, to recognise that we have a responsibility for other humans. Okay, so that's one of the things that I noticed in the chart. And of course, because that squares Chiron and opposes Jupiter, then it's very difficult for the personality or indeed for the government to lift its game to that highest vibration where we think in terms of inclusiveness for humanity. So what I would love to see would be, a recognition that we have an international community and that people from across the board of different colours, different races, different religions make up the fabric of the Australian community. And of course, this is the crisis and the challenge, not to split as a result of what's happened on the Bondi Beach into camps of us and them. you know, the white Australians, the Christians, the whatever, the us and the them. So Chiron is asking for unity, not separation. Other things to notice in the chart when we think about the purpose. Whenever you think about the purpose, you must look to the North Node. There's the North Node in Pisces, which is the sign of compassion in its highest vibration, in the segment or the part of the chart to do with family. So we need to recognise that the Australian nation is made up of all these different people, different races, come from different places, and have compassion for that. Now, the North Node has this fantastic trine up to the midheaven. So I think that's extremely hopeful for a large section. I would hope a large section of the Australian populace being able to work from from a place of the heart where they recognise that sort of sense of we are all our brothers and sisters keepers, irrespective of what country we come from or what religion that we have. And then, of course, because the North Node is in Pisces, we must look to Neptune. And there we are back to the Saturn-Neptune conjunction again. And our Neptune's been hanging around the end of Pisces on and off for the last 12 months. So by the time we get to the end of January, it goes rocketing forward into Aries, and that's the end of Neptune in Pisces. There are the greatest delusions of the greatest lies that can be promulgated when Neptune's in the last degree of Pisces. So if you tell a lie often enough and repeat it often enough, then it becomes truth. And what the ordinary Australian has to do, because Saturn and Neptune falls in the ordinary part of the chart, the sixth house, is to recognise the difference between international lies versus ordinary reality. Yeah. Okay, and for many Australians, the ordinary reality comes back to doing it tough. Not enough money, stress to do with all kinds of matters financial. Yes. The other thing that I notice is Pluto, the planet associated, one of the planets associated with war, along with Mars, is in the house of the home. So this is the terror that has been exported, I would say, onto the Australian shore. And I notice the inconjunct that goes up to the house, the international house. And so we have to be very, very careful that we don't decide, you know, America's right and China's wrong, or Israel's right and Iran's wrong, and make judgments that separate and alienate. And of course, the Australian government's been having trouble because on the one hand, we want to be friendly with both China and America. America, because previously we thought they were the ones who'd protect and defend us. We're not so sure about that now. And China, because that's where our bread's buttered. But we have Pluto comes and sits in the home. So if that was in an individual's chart, you know, I might say to the individual, well, there could be some deeply disturbing undercurrent happening in the family that needs to be brought into greater light. So I hope that we don't end up with, you know, laws that are driven through the parliament to lock Australia down and keep the Arabs or the people of different races or cultures out. I hope we don't foster that sort of all immigrants are dangerous. Okay. Now, if I want to look at the chart in terms of the health of the nation, well, then I have to look at different parts of the chart. If I'm looking at health, I need to look at the ascendant, which is the 24th degree of Libra, with Chiron directly opposite. Now, if that was in an individual's chart, the person would be undergoing or experiencing great interpersonal stress. Their marriage would be breaking down. There'd be a crisis with a significant other in their family life. So we look at this and say, who are the significant others when it comes to the Australians? And these significant others, well, they may well be that it's our relationship with them on the one hand, or the relationship with China on the other hand. Or it could simply be that it's the relationship between the people who agree with the Australian government and the people who see things differently. So we have to be very, very careful in this first 3 months that we don't marginalise the other, either within Australian society or lock Australia down and say, well, external is people coming from other countries are the other. Yes, and that's because we have that Grand Cross, Jupiter, Chiron, the Ascendant, and the Moon. Yes, hopeful things in this chart in terms of the health of the nation is this Jupiter Saturn trine. Yeah. Now, when Jupiter and Saturn are trine, we generally manage to balance our wealth and our health. We get a healthy balance between time at home with family, what we need to do for our own well-being, and time out in the world. So it appears that there will be segments of the Australian population who will find balance and not be drawn into any global issues that are promulgated either because of fear of people of different religions or different colour, or fear of people who speak up against the government. Yeah. Okay. The wealth of the nation. Let's have a look. Now, when you're looking at wealth, same chart, but when you're looking at wealth, we look at different parts of the chart. The first place we look for wealth is the second house. And here we have the 27th degree of Scorpio and Mercury sitting in Sagittarius, square the nodal axis. Right. So if that was in an individual's chart, I'd probably say to them something along the lines of, it looks like it's not a very easy year for you on a financial level, and you might have to cut back on some non-essentials and streamline your income and your expenditure so that you don't live beyond your means and not get too scattered. I could also say to such an individual, you might need to have more than one job to balance the books. So that's the same message to the Australian public. Some parts of the Australian public may need more than one job to balance the books. Some may have to streamline and do without. Others may feel that there's a precariousness to the wealth or the economy of the Australian populace in the first 3 months. There's instability. And so people sit on their wallets, they don't spend. Yeah? And I don't know whether that will affect, for instance, Christmas trade or small businesses or what have you. Mercury is in conjunct the midheaven. Now, of course, the government, in terms of the wealth, primarily the wealth, the Australian wealth, comes from the resources that we dig up out of the ground that we sell to China. So, of course, any instability that happens in Venezuela, which is really about America and China and the battle for who controls the Americas, will have a run-on effect into the Australian economy. So that's enough to make the economists in the government nervous, because anything that blows up between China and America is bound to affect the Australian economy. Other things to notice is Uranus sitting on the 8th house cusp, because it's the second house and the 8th house that are associated with money. This is the money that comes in. That's the second house. This is how we spend it in our day-to-day life. And this is the debts we own and or inheritance. So when I see Uranus there, if that was in an individual's chart, I might say to them, well, maybe there will be an inheritance come, but you could also have a very sudden reversal of your fortunes. And therefore, I might advise such a person not to invest on the stock market because it's unpredictable. I might advise such a person not to pay down their loans and their debts, and not to be living on the never, never, not to borrow more than they can repay. I might also suggest that there's instability in the banking sector. So all of those things apply to the average Australian citizen in the first 3 months. Live within your means, pay down your debts, be wary of borrowing more than you can repay, and be very careful and mindful of whatever instability may come about on the national or indeed the international financial world. That could be the stock market, it could be crypto, it could be the international central bank digital currency, it could be all of those things. Yeah? Having said all of that, notice the sextile that goes from Uranus down to Saturn. Now, that's a fantastic stabilizing force. If you think about the global economy impacting the national economy, and that's a bit of a wild card, there's stability. So stability, I would say, would come from support Australian businesses, support your local business, support businesses who trade with cash. If you've got money that you can lend to your children or your grandchildren, fantastic. Yeah, there's a networking into the ordinary day-to-day people to balance and equalise the international instability that comes from Uranus sitting in the 8th house. The other thing I noticed when I looked at the chart, because the second cusp has a great deal to do with finances, I looked at the 27th degree of Scorpio. And the Sabian symbol for that is a military band on the march. So I immediately started thinking, does that mean that the government will be investing a lot of money into keeping Australia safe, especially after the Bondi massacre, the beach? Will it be the Australian military band on the march? Will we be asked to continue to send money and or troops into Ukraine? Because, of course, we have the unknown issue of what's happening between Russia and Ukraine. So I don't know which military band is it on the march. Is it the Australian government getting up to its eyeballs in debt to get nuclear submarines that the Americans are going to give us? Is that the Australian government living beyond its means? But I'm a bit concerned that money will be thrown towards the military. Okay. Let's have a look at the international, same chart, but looking at it from an international affairs and also the Dharma. International affairs is the 9th house of the chart, and the Dharma is the earth. Dharma being what it is we need to do right now to deal with what's occurring. Okay, so we see the solstice point of the sun in the 3rd house, directly opposite the earth in the 9th house. And immediately I think of China as our major trading partner, and I see Cancer on the midheaven. So I keep seeing that whatever happens to China happens to Australia in the first 3 months. And one of the things that I've heard recently is that the American economy is in inflation or even hyperinflation, whereas the Chinese economy is in deflation. And I don't claim to know a great deal about money, but as I understand it, it means that what the Chinese are doing with their digital currency means that they can produce more at a cheaper cost, whereas the opposite is happening in America. And indeed, the opposite is happening in Australia. Everything costs more, I think, in the Western world, in America, in Australia, whereas in fact, the economics in China are much more as their economy is going the opposite direction. So therefore, it seems obvious to me that the China and therefore the BRICS nations will be forging ahead in the first 3 months of 2026. And so you'd have to ask, has Australia backed the wrong horse? You know, if we make the BRICS countries, we make Russia and we make China, we make Brazil, we make the African countries the enemy, the other, are we shooting ourselves in the foot economically? Yeah. Okay. Other things to notice. What have I got there? The Venus-Saturn square. Why did I want to talk about that? I can't quite remember now. Oh, I was talking about the international affairs, and of course, because of the global cabal wanting to separate and divide and make some people of a certain religion or a certain colour the good guys and others the bad guys, the fall guys, is Australia going to fall into that trap? Yeah. Are the average Australian smart enough to sidestep that religious xenophobia and work with people of all colours and indeed trade with people of all colours? Because, of course, what America's trying to do by bombing the Venezuelan boats is to dictate to Venezuela who they can trade with. So not content to lord it over them in other ways, they want to stop them from trading with China. Well, can you imagine what would happen if all of a sudden that trading policy that the Americans have is turned against Australia and we were told actually you can't trade with China, because that's what's happening with the Venezuelans. So we have to be very, very careful that we don't fall into the trap of separate and divide. I did look at the moon conjunct Vega in the 18th degree of Capricorn, and the Sabian symbol says the Union Jack flies from a new British destroyer. I don't quite know what that means, but it's obviously got a naval British war energy about it. So I don't know, how that may manifest, but I'd certainly say watch this space, because there may be something that occurs in the first 3 months that it's got some connection to a British destroyer. The other thing that I couldn't help thinking about when I looked at this chart, because the international affairs is up there and it's the sign of Cancer, and Cancer is ruled by the moon in Capricorn. And I thought about our government trying to secure itself as the primary ally of the Pacific neighbours of New Guinea, of Samoa, of Fiji. And the Pacific is governed by Pisces. And so I wonder whether there may be crisis in the Pacific. Who knows what that would be? Could it be environmental, oceans rising? And that as a neighbour of Pacific nations, we are called to help. Yeah, so that's another question mark that I have. Is Australia, does it have a duty of care for its Pacific neighbours? A little bit more of this teaching on the citadel of love. Together we will face the storm of darkness and drive it back. The storm of darkness, I would say, is the global cabal. Together we will surround our planet with light. And together we unite within the heart of all. Together we can overcome. Do you remember the sweet victory of love? Do you remember the sweet victory of the protection of innocence? Do you remember the sweet victory of the refusal of the shadow? So we're told what it is we have to do. Work from the heart of love, protect the innocent, and refuse to be drawn into the shadow. Will you stand with us? Come now to the citadel, to the fortress of light. Come now to the citadel, to the fortress of hope. Come now to the citadel, to the fortress of love. And of course, this citadel is nothing more than the energy of cosmic love, you might say cosmic consciousness, whatever it is that you would define as goodness and love. We have prepared a fortress of light, a fortress of hope, a fortress of love. This is your home, your place of protection. Come. Within these walls of light, hope and love we stand. Within these walls we fight. Within these walls we are victorious. And so the light, the hope and the love streams out all over the earth. And so the light, the hope, the love streams into the hearts of the lost and the troubled. Yes, and we've been told how we can operate from the heart of love to protect innocence, to refuse to be drawn into shadow, to refuse to separate and marginalise and divide, to act from the energy of brother-sisterliness, which comes from that meditation of Lady Ananda's 17 Steps to Perfection. And of course, there's my links. So that's my thoughts on the next 3 months. We shall see how it plays out. Thank you for your attention.